Kusari is a very interesting weapon group in GURPS. This is a very stylish weapon that has many special rules, so let's dive deep into the books and find everything that might be useful. First, Kusari is a hard difficulty skill, unlike most melee weapon skills. GURPS basic set says that this skill covers weighted chains wielded in two hands. If you look at the weapon table, the only Kusari there is a one-handed weapon. I found no errata or any clarifications about this. So let's check GURPS low-tech, maybe Kusaris are two-handed there. As you can see on the table, most of them are two-handed weapons with the exception of the actual Kusari. GURPS low-tech errata does not say anything about this either. I even checked DAF RPG, and it's the same there. The skill description says that the Kusaris are two-handed, but the weapon table disagrees. What is correct? I have no idea. I am no weapon or martial arts expert, but it feels to me that the Kusari should be a two-handed weapon. After all, how would you adjust its reach with just one hand? Or maybe you can attack with one hand but you need the other hand to change reach? On the other hand, I have been shown videos of people using a 2-yard Kusari one-handed. Or maybe you can use a Kusari up to 2 yards with one hand, but longer ones with two hands? I just don't know. I have never noticed this rule inconsistency before. Kusari is a very special weapon group, because every single weapon is very different from the rest. So I will have to talk about each one of them separately. Let's start with the Kusari itself, because many of the rules will also apply to other weapons. First, you have two weapon profiles, swing and thrust, and both deal decent damage. The damage type is crushing though, so you probably won't get a good injury multiplier. Reach is 1 to 4 yards with a need for a ready maneuver to adjust it. Parry is awful, a -2 penalty and unbalanced. Sure, you can mitigate the unbalancedness with defensive attacks, but -2 is still not good. This is definitely not a defensive weapon. Cost is affordable. Weight is high enough to break some very light weapons. Strength requirement is only 11, nothing severe. So far, it seems quite underwhelming, but not everything is on the table. Page 406 of GURPS basic set has special rules for Kusaris. Since the Kusaris are a subset of whips, some whip rules apply as well. First, when you attack with a Kusari to disarm, you get a +2 in the ensuing quick contest, just like when using Jitte/Sai. Second, you can use a Kusari to entangle the opponent instead of damaging him. This attack is resolved at a -4 penalty and uses the Lariat rules. For more on that, watch my lasso video. This aspect of Kusari use can be improved with the entangle technique from GURPS martial arts. Kusari also behaves like a flail. Attempts to parry Kusaris are at -4. Fencing weapons and knives, if you go by GURPS basic set, cannot parry them at all. Fencing weapons wielded in defensive grip can parry them, but with the normal penalties. Blocks against Kusaris are at -2. But there's something extra. If someone parries your Kusari with a weapon, make an immediate skill roll. On a success, your Kusari entangles the weapon. On a failure, nothing special happens. But on a critical failure, you drop the Kusari. On his turn, the opponent can disentangle his weapon with a dexterity roll if he has a free hand. If he doesn't do that, on the next turn you may disarm the opponent without rolling to hit. Just roll your quick contest, and remember that you get a +2 bonus. GURPS martial arts also expands these rules a bit. If the opponent uses cross parry with two weapons, he can parry even with fencing weapons, but you can entangle both of his weapons. This is brutal. That's cool and all, but there are some detrimental special rules as well. First, If you have your Kusari not on reach 1, that is reach 2, 3 or 4, then it becomes unready after an attack or a parry. It takes 1 turn to ready a 2-yard Kusari and 2 turns to ready a longer Kusari. I highly recommend getting the Reach Mastery perk to be able to change Reach as a free action. However, you should keep in mind that this does not affect time required to ready a long Kusari after attacking or parrying. I will link Chrome's post on this topic in the description. To be able to ready Kusari quicker, you'll have to use the extra ready approach that I talked about in the video about two-handed axes and maces. If you swing your Kusari, you must have enough headroom or free space to your side. The rules for fighting in confined spaces that you can find in GURPS Underground Adventures say that you can use swinging weapons in such situations, but at the normal close combat penalties from GURPS Martial Arts. GURPS Basic Set obviously was written before GURPS Martial Arts, so I am not sure if this limitation for the Kusari was intended to be a hard no to using these weapons when obstacles are present, or if they meant that you can still use them, but at the close combat penalties that were introduced later in GURPS Martial Arts. Also, on a critical miss on a swinging attack, a roll of 3, 4, 17 or 18 indicates that you have hit yourself in the face, and that will hurt a lot. These two drawbacks can be mitigated if you snap the Kusari at the opponent instead of swinging. This is what the second thrust weapon profile is for. I have already mentioned the entangle technique, but there are some other ones that might be useful with a Kusari. Armed grapple gives you a new close combat option. Disarming will make you even better at disarming than normal. And the last but not least, return strike. I talked about this technique in my video about flails, but it is also available for the Kusaris. This technique allows you to strike the enemy from behind while facing him, and your long reach makes it easier to use. Thus, you can use a reach 3 Kusari to strike enemies 2 yards away from you from the back, a reach 4 Kusari to strike enemies 3 yards away from you, and so on. This is an excellent combat option that is worth investing into. I should note that you cannot use the sweep technique with the Kusari. To do the thing D&D Spike Chain specialists do, use the entangle technique. Finally, I should mention that there is the fast draw flexible specialty that was introduced in GURPS Martial Arts. So we took a look at only one of the weapons. The next one is the chain whip. It uses the same rules as the Kusari, but it has some special features as well. The length of the chain whip is not fixed 4 yards. It can be from 1 to 4 yards long. This results in more flexibility. Long chain whips will be heavier and more expensive than the Kusari, but will also deal more damage. However, you cannot thrust with the chain whip, which is a downside in cramped spaces. The rope dart is cheaper and lighter. It has reach 1 to 4 yards without the need to change it with a ready maneuver. It can be used to swing for quite low crushing damage or thrust for low impaling damage. However, it doesn't actually use any of the special whip rules. It cannot be used to entangle, it does not entangle weapons, it's not good for disarming either. I believe that the free space and critical miss restrictions still apply, but it is not stated anywhere. Basically, this is closer to a throwing dagger that can be retrieved after being thrown. And no, you cannot reel people in like Scorpion. The Kusari Gamma is a combination weapon. It's a Kama with a 2-yard Kusari attached to the handle's butt. So this is not a weapon, this is 2 weapons. So you will have to use the normal dual wielding rules. Consider either buying the ambidexterity advantage or the offhand training perk. The first 2 attack profiles are for attacks with a 2-yard Kusari. The third attack profile is for swinging the Kama on the end of the chain. When used this way, the Kusari Gamma cannot disarm or entangle like a regular Kusari. Needless to say, this is a cinematic option. Normal attacks with the Kama use the sickle stat line, so if you are planning to use a Kusari Gamma, you should also invest in the axe/mace skill, and possibly even the hook technique. The intended way to use this weapon is to entangle with a Kusari and finish the enemy off with the Kama. This is super stylish, but it requires a lot of investment. But this is only one version of this weapon. The text in GURPS Low-Tech has two more. The second variant is a Kusari Gamma with a 4-yard Kusari affixed to the butt. The third variant is a Kusari Gamma with a 2-yard Kusari atop the handle, opposite the blade. This permits one-handed use but counts only as one weapon, either a Kusari or a Kama. Choose each turn. I assume that this version uses the same stat line as the normal Kusari Gamma. GURPS Dungeon Fantasy 12 Ninja has another weapon, a Kusari Gamma. This is a scythe with a 4-yard Kusari mounted on the head. It is possible to plant the staff on the ground or against the body with a hand. Takes a ready maneuver but lowers the weapon's strength requirement by 1, and swing the Kusari with the other. When used as a scythe, use the scythe stat line, so you might want to invest in the two-handed axe mace skill, and maybe even the hook technique. In a cinematic game, you can swing the entire scythe by the chain. Damage becomes swing plus 4 cutting, but strength requirement becomes 15. Cost is $95 and weight is 10 pounds. And if the Kusari is mounted on the head, I have no idea how you can swing it. I can only imagine it being viable if the Kusari is mounted on the butt. The Kusari Jutte is a Jutte with a 2-yard Kusari attached to the handle. Just like the Kusari Gamma, this is actually two weapons, so you have to invest in the Jitte/Sai skill or Mengash. The latter option is quite nice, because the Kusari is not a good defensive weapon, so a fencing off-hand parry is a good addition. This combination weapon works even better for disarming opponents, as you become able to disarm both on a successful attack and on a successful parry. Some versions hide the Kusari inside the Jutte and release it out the tip of the weapon. This should work like the third version of the Kusari Gamma. One-handed use is permitted but counts as only one weapon, either a Jutte or a Kusari. Choose each turn. This disguised option is twice as expensive for a mass-produced item, or 5 times as expensive for a custom-built one. But that's still not all the options. GURPS Low-Tech Companion 2 has rules for attaching a 2 or 4-yard Kusari to almost any other weapons. So you can have Kusari swords, Kusari axes, Kusari glaive gisarms, or even Kusari flails. How do these combination weapons interact with fast draw? Do you use fast draw flexible, or is the specialty appropriate for the second half? My gut tells me that you should use the latter, or maybe that you cannot use fast draw with them at all. Or maybe this is where the dual ready perk might come in handy. I should also mention the barbed chain from GURPS Low-Tech Companion 2. It's an exotic weapon that has an intrinsic -1 penalty to hit that can be mitigated by the exotic weapon training perk. It deals more damage and imposes a -2 penalty on all rolls to escape entanglement. As a downside, any critical failure on any attack deals 1d -2 cutting damage to the hands of the user. Cost is double. GURPS Dungeon Fantasy 12 Ninja also says that barbed versions of Kusari Gamma and Kusari Jutte exist as well. These cost $175. Oh, by the way, the same book also says that if you'd like to use a Kusari as a thrown weapon, you should use the Bolas skill. And that's finally it. As you can see, Kusari is easily the most complex weapon group with many special rules. You might have to learn rules for dual wielding, special rules for whips, Jitte/Sai, hooked weapons, flails, lasso, and even bolas. This is definitely not a good weapon choice for a new player, but an experienced player definitely has a lot of room to capitalize on specific gimmicks. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.